Welcome to our STS-47 post-launch news conference. Our players this morning from your left are Brewster Shaw, Deputy Manager, Space Shuttle, NASA Headquarters, and Robert B. Seek, Launch Director of the Kennedy Space Center. And we'll start off with Brewster Shaw.
Okay, thank you, Dick. Well, what a fabulous day to have a space flight launch in Florida. Weather was beautiful, as it typically is here in Florida, as you all know. We were blessed by the presence of the Vice President of the United States, Mr. Quayle, and his family, who came down to visit with us and watch the launch on their way to South Florida. Our administrator was here. We had an on-time launch, a very clean countdown. We now have 7 individuals on orbit in a healthy machine, and 7 days ahead of them in which to conduct a multitude of scientific experiments, joint experiments between the United States of America and Japan. And those experiments will delve primarily into materials and the processes that affect them, and life sciences studies. So we're off to a super start, and we look forward to the week coming and success in the conduct of those experiments, and then a safe and successful landing of Endeavour, so we can turn it around and fly it again, which is the business we're in. That's about it.
Ma'am?
Well, the team, of course, is always proud of an operation that's conducted by the book and culminates on time with a vehicle, in this case, going to orbit that is 100% operational. We had a good count through the night. There were some challenges. The weather yesterday evening did slow down the operation a little bit, but the team last night recovered from that. And the only real threats we had were from the ground systems. We had a power supply which we had to switch in a backup unit for one of our main buses on the orbiter. And the range support people had to recover from a power outage that brought their 2 primary computers down after midnight, and they did a super job of bringing those back online and getting their support services up to support per the timeline, which is characteristic of the support that they have given us through the years. The tanking operation went well. We did talk about the hydrogen concentration in the aft fuselage. The Endeavour, as you know, has only been tanked 2 times prior to this, so we're still in the process of characterizing the aft fuselage under cryogenic conditions. We've established launch commit criteria as red lines for the loading and for the launch. And during the fast fill of hydrogen, we were toggling with the hydrogen concentration very close to the limit. Sometimes it was in spec, and sometimes it was a little out of spec of the 500 parts per million, which is what we're allowed per our rules for aft fuselage concentration. We proceeded with the filling, and as expected, when we got to replenishing the tank and topped it off, it fell well within spec, which is what it was at liftoff. So we're taking a look at that red line value. We did adjust it to 600 parts per million for this flight. We did characterize that the leakage, whatever there was in what we call the low pressure system, which is not changed during the ascent portion of the mission, and we're going to revisit that as part of our ongoing review of all the launch commit criteria after we've been through a launch count. And after that, we did have to go back in the crew module after the crew was ingressed to verify that the hatch linkage was proper, because one of the measurements that we took off of that when we closed the hatch indicated that it might not be locked. So that put the closeout crew a little behind the timeline, but as you know, they caught up on that, and we were ready to go at the beginning of the window, and that's when we launched. It's a good reward for the team. The work on this vehicle, as you know, really started some months ago when we turned Endeavour around and started the turnaround from its previous mission. We hope that this one is just as successful as that mission.
Thanks, Ben. We'll accept questions at this time. Please wait for the mic, give your name and affiliation. Jim?
Jim Banky, Florida Today. I guess for Bob, could you address again, you signed a waiver on that aft compartment, and was that the only waiver you signed? And I want to ask you about the aircraft that flew over the launch pad. Does that give you guys a start when that happens at 10 o'clock, so close to launch?
The waiver, we did process a waiver. We actually changed the launch commit criteria for Endeavour. We're going to revisit that again, but we did waive the 500 parts per million up to 560, which was the maximum that we saw. And we did have another waiver, which is really a documentation of an old one on our auxiliary power unit. We have a temperature measurement on a heater, which appears to be a little bit on the cold side every time we chill down the orbiter aft fuselage. That one we're probably also going to revisit, but it's not a safety concern. The aircraft, there were aircraft in the area within a half hour of launch count, but they were clear whenever the range did their final status check at 9 minutes.
Sue, hold your hand up, please.
Sue Butler, Time Magazine and Daytona Beach News Journal. Bob, you had an absolutely perfect launch on time, not a second late, the first one since '85, I believe. How do you feel about this? Would you wax enthusiastically, since you're always so deadpan? And would you tell us whether you consider this a good omen, perhaps, for the next 25 or 50 or 75, or spell out a number?
Well, Sue, if you make too big a deal about it being on time, then if you launch one 5 minutes or 50 minutes late, it would be looked at as a negative thing, and that's not the case. What counts is when you do launch, the machine is 100% operational and it's ready to support a safe and successful mission. And that when you got to that point, you can look back on the process and say it was done by the book and it was done in an orderly fashion. Sometimes that all works out to be ready to launch right on the second. Sometimes because of hardware problems or weather problems or something operational, you don't make it on time. But it's still just as good a launch, even if it goes an hour or so late.
Please tell us about the omen and what you foresee for the next 25, 50, 75, or whatever launch.
If you want me to predict the future, you're going to see a lot more launches. They're going to be close to the beginning of the window. We've refined our launch count procedures. As we look back over the previous 8 to 10 launches, one of our challenges has always been to start tanking on time. The last 24 hours of launch preparation is a real test for the team out there to clear the pad and get all the equipment up and running to support tanking. We have, for every launch this year and the last few of last year, have been ready to start tanking anywhere from an hour to 5 minutes before the actual start. That's a good record. If we can continue to demonstrate that, we could conceivably give up the 1 hour hold prior to the start of tanking and just let the clock run from T-minus 11 all the way through. That's the kind of things we'll continue to look at as we launch for 25, 50, or however many years you want to look down the road.
Harry?
Harry Colcom, Aviation Week for Brewster. Brewster, what does today's launch, affect your plans for the rest of the year, and what are the plans for the rest of the year?
No, it doesn't affect him, other than it doesn't bump us to the right any, because we got off on time. And the plans for the rest of the year are to, in mid-October, to launch STS-52 on Columbia, and then in mid-November to launch STS-53 on Discovery. And that will be it for this calendar year. The next flight will be in January, mid-January.
Mark,
So
did
it
you have
keeps
your
us on track.
Excuse me. Martin, you have your hand up?
Martin Berkey with the Huntsville Times. I wasn't clear. Did I hear some stuff about some thrusters on board or some of the maneuvering engines?
We had an aft firing thruster that indicated a failed off condition shortly after the ET separation maneuver.
Does that mean it was a problem? I heard them say that it may have been a false reading. And will you just go ahead and shut that unit down?
Thruster? Well, there's no shutting it down, really. And it may have been a false indication. Sometimes we get thruster fail-off fault messages and annunciations, and they can be real or they can be false. And what you do is look at the data and see how the vehicle responded, and you can tell if that thruster was putting out any thrust or not, and how much, and therefore determine whether it worked or not.
Holman?
Is NASA considering another missions with the Japanese for the next future? And how do you see this first mission with the first Japanese in the space, in the space shuttle?
Well, I see this mission, the first one, as a very positive step towards hopefully continued and future cooperation between the United States of America and Japan. As you know, Japan is one of our partners on the space station project, so certainly we are going to have future cooperative adventures with Japan, and this is just the beginning.
Phil?
Phil Chen-Earthnes, for Bob's sake, I won't ask you to wax, but you've had 25 successful launches now since the return to flight. How different is it for you now than it was in September '88 at the L-9 hold when you're going through polling the entire team? Any less nervous now? Any more confident that the team's got everything more refined?
Well, there's got to be more confidence because of all of the previous ones that are under our belt. But I think from the standpoint of the team, the confidence really builds from the standpoint that you build a set of procedures which you've refined, and they give a good verification of the hardware before you get to that point of polling everyone at 9 minutes. And that's one of the reasons it takes less time now. As you notice, there's less chatter on the nets, and that's indicative of more confidence. And I think, again, as you look down the road, that's what you're going to see in the future. But the procedures will still require the same rigor and the same verifications of the hardware down the road, just like they do today and just like they did back on STS-46. We just get better and more efficient at running them.
Todd?
Todd Halverson of Florida Today for either of you gentlemen. I understand Vice President Quayle addressed the launch team after the liftoff. Could you tell us a little bit about that exchange?
Well, you were closer to it than I was, Bob, so go ahead.
Well, he congratulated the team on a safe and successful launch, and for all the work that they put in to make that possible. And he reminded them and all of us that it's our goal for this country to remain #1 in space, and we certainly appreciate the commitment that Washington has shown to that end with the recent activity that's gone on in Washington. He then mingled with all of the team members in the Launch Control Center and enjoyed some of our post-launch beans also.
Todd, we can provide you with tape on some of that material. Sharish?
Sharish Dati with the Orlando Sentinel. First for Bob, the 500 parts per million, is that based on the other orbiters' levels during the fast fill? And if you change the LCC, will it be only for the fast fill portion of the countdown?
The other orbiters, for instance, Columbia, we've established the red line for fast fill at 600 parts per million because it has a signature to be a little bit higher than the others. And Endeavour, we put it in with the others in the family, which is 500 parts per million. And that was some of the rationale. We know 600 parts per million is a safe limit, and in fact, it could probably be a lot higher than that. And if you extrapolate that into a leak not on orbit but during ascent, it still would be well within the safety limits. So that's why we were comfortable with the fact that it steadied out between 500 and 600. There's also, whenever you get into terminal count and you pressurize the tank, again, you will see the same kind of pressures as you see in fast fill. We have a rule that is established that says, again, if you see an exceedance above 300 parts per million, that you should wait for some 2 to 5 minutes and see if it's going to increase any more above the 500 parts per million in this case. Of course, we didn't have a hold in terminal count, but it also did not exceed the 300 parts per million. But we did adjust that limit also to the 560 in this case, which it did not exceed.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, that's a little different question, actually. Challenger was 25, this is 25 after Challenger. Is there any sort of irrational relief that you've got this one behind you now and, you know, you don't have that hanging over you anymore?
Well, again, I don't tend to keep score on these things. I look ahead and not backwards. So the number doesn't have that much significance. The fact that this one was safe and successful, that has significance, and now we're hoping the mission goes that way too, and we're going to look forward to the next one in October.
Gentleman next to the wall then.
Alan Lipke, Christian Science Monitor. Bob, after 25 and 25 missions, you're budget limited at 7 or 8 shuttle missions a year. How many can you do on the resources? Do you see that number rising at any point, and if so, when?
Well, the budget process, of course, gets revisited every year. Right now, for next year, with the cap, as it were, that we've been given, we can meet the manifest, and the same applies for 94. But understand that each year the budget process goes through that activity in Washington, and it could get changed one way or another.
The question is, if you didn't have to worry about the budget process, how much can you speed up turnaround? Can you get to 10 or 12 a year?
Well, theoretically, on paper, you could do that with the resources that we have, but that would be on what I call a surge basis. Right now, we've laid out with our resources, with what the budget allows us, and our flow based on our capability today. 8 a year is what I call that comfortable flight rate. Anything less than that is a lot more comfort, and theoretically less work content, so would allow you to have less resources. Anything more than that, then you have to look at resources. It's either increased overtime or more people.
And don't forget, however, that we're here and we're in the business of flying space shuttles. And so this whole program is not well served by sitting on the ground. Our object is to fly as much as we can.
Jim?
Just a question, the APU thing, do you have any way to address that, or should that be sent over to Houston? One APU overheating down?
That's in Houston's hands now, and I don't have very much information about that, and so I don't want to talk about it yet because I don't know what I'm talking about.
Do you have a follow-up?
Tomorrow we'll know.
Okay.
Stephen Galvan, KTRK-TV, Houston. It seemed that there was an awful lot going on at the time when the Vice President was addressing the crew. Was that really squeezed in at that time, and when did he begin to go long and perhaps infringe upon any developments that had to follow after that?
No, we had anticipated the Vice President was going to show up somewhere between minus 20 minutes and the hold at minus 9. The activity then, there was more than usual because we had to go back in the crew module and verify the hatch linkage. So that delayed our cabin pressurization test. So there was a lot more dialogue going on at minus 20 and minus 15 with the crew than there normally is at that point in time. But the message from the Vice President did in no way impact our sequence of work at that point in time. And when we had a good opportunity, that's when we worked them in.
I think we have time for one more question. Do I see any hands out there? No more questions, and Martin, do you have one more? You're gonna be the wrap-up man.
Thanks. Martin Berkey with the Huntsville Times. Do you have any data as yet on how the main engines performed and how the orbiter hit its marks on ascent?
Well, the CDR called down an on-speed MECO, and of course, he can't read it to hundredths of a foot per second, but all the data we had on the ground was that the engines performed as expected. Otto Getz, the engine project manager, was there watching the data all the way through main stage, and he was real pleased with what he saw.
We do have one question from Goddard that was faxed in, and we'll answer that directly online with a telephone call. And there being no more questions, we'll wrap this one up. The next event in this room will be a news conference in Japanese at a time to be announced within the next few minutes. Thank you very much for coming.
Vic,
You're
we are
welcome.
hoping asking about the foreign press.